Okay, time now for our rants and raves. All right, starting with you, Dan. What's your rant or rave?
I have a rant for this truly awful podcast that the New York Times put up
Yes.
about a week ago, in which they had the host and two guests endorsing what did they call it? Micro looting. And
Microluding.
and you had these very elite effete members of the media class endorsing the idea of, well, it's okay to steal from Whole Foods and other big box stores because they're corporations and corporations are evil. And they were even talking about the murder of that healthcare executive, Brian Thompson. And they weren't endorsing that, but they were kind of saying, well, I can really see why some people were sympathetic to that. It was really just terrible. And we do need to name names, so I'm going to
Yeah.
have to look at my notes here. It was political commentator Hassan Pier, who's become something of a celebrity,
Mhm.
New Yorker writer Gia Tolentino,
Mhm.
and the host, Nadja Spiegelman. I listened to the whole thing and I was just appalled from start to
I
finish.
couldn't get through it all, but it was, I agree, revolting. All right, Lila, what do you got?
So I have a cautious rave for TMZ for opening up a Washington, D.C. bureau. There's something that's just really amusing about them chasing like Lindsey Graham down the halls and then not asking a policy question, but asking him about holding a bubble wand at the Magic Kingdom. There's something interesting about them, buttonholing Ted Cruz and asking him questions that really don't pertain to policy or wonky things. But really, for me, it's the acknowledgement that DC has become kind of a scripted reality TV show or semi-scripted, the way Trump treats everything like it's a production, controlling the messaging. The show, you have had press conferences with stacks and stacks and stacks of bound what they say are studies that are actually full of blank pages. It feels like it's time someone acknowledged that if it's going to be treated like a reality TV show, it should be covered like one.
Yeah, good point. I think Grindr sent somebody out to Washington too, didn't they?
Grindr's different because they've become a social media platform instead of a dating platform.
Oh,
They
okay.
held a party at the White House Correspondents' Dinner before a pre-dinner party
Really?
aimed at
Hmm.
LGBTQ legislators and journalists. And so they're not really covering it as much as they're capitalizing it on it.
Okay, good. All right, Scott, what do you got?
I have a rant for the BBC about its coverage of the Iran in general and the Iran war. It's come under fire from the former head of the BBC Persian service, Sadek Saba, who complains on a couple of different fronts. One is that they've held the BBC has a long-standing agreement with the Iranian government where when they send Lise Doucet, who's a great reporter, to do reporting in Tehran, stories don't go on the BBC's Persian service. So that's number one. They're getting out there to UK, US, wherever else the BBC is broadcast, but they're not. You can't hear it, and of course, you get into the technical questions with could you hear it anyway? Did they jam it? So forth. But it's still, he thinks it's a big issue, and he feels that their coverage has been kind of a mechanical kind of we have to show both sides. In his view, is downplaying or at least wasn't tapping into the outrage that people feel towards a tyrannical regime. Um, it's a tough situation. I think other news organizations have done similar deals, but it's also like, well, it's can be manipulated. As Saba pointed out, that you're interviewing somebody in Tehran, they're going to be very careful what they say, or you're interviewing people that who knows where they're what the motive is. So, and with social media, with technology, you can cover it's in some ways you can still cover, is he saying, Iran without having to go and do kind of the dog and pony show that the government would want. So that was my thing.
All right, good point. All right, well, I have also a rant for mostly local television because that's where I saw this story about this breathless reporting about somebody who self-reported that they had measles. They came through Terminal C at midnight at Logan Airport, and then I guess reported themselves that they had measles. It felt very political to me because, I mean, many people come through. I sat next to somebody who I'm sure had the flu on a flight, but you're not, more people are going to die of the flu this year than measles. But it felt, as I say, political because there's so much tisting now over people who don't get vaccinated. And I know there've been a lot of breakouts, especially in the South, and I'm not minimizing it, but they then followed up with like with doctors on the set, what are the chances you could be infected? He said zero. I mean, virtually zero. And and it was actually the lead story for like 2 days in a row that one person had measles. And we don't know whether it was a child or an adult. And I don't know who to tisk on that, but I thought it was outrageous. And I noticed the newspapers didn't do the same thing. It was mostly local TV. All right, that is it. And that is it for Beat the Press. You can catch us on Contrary in Boston, of course, or on YouTube. Our thanks today to Scott Van Voorhis, Dan Kennedy, Lila Alphonse. I'm Emily Rooney.